The karate champion stood on the elevated platform, completely unaware of who he had just pointed at. Neither did the tournament organizers know. The 3 judges seated behind the scoring table certainly didn't, nor did the 300 spectators packing the Sheraton Park Hotel ballroom in Washington, D.C. No one had a clue. Only 4 individuals in that entire venue understood the true identity of the small man sitting in the 3rd row, the man who had just been called out, the small man asked to come up and serve as a demonstration dummy. The 61-kilogram figure with an unassuming appearance, looking like any casual attendee who had wandered in out of mere curiosity. No one suspected that over the next 11 minutes, the most dominant point fighter in American karate history would be humiliated in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress. His undefeated streak, his legendary kick, his reputation, 11 years of absolute supremacy would start to crumble, not because of a renounced challenger, not because of a prepared rival, but because of a man he himself had randomly picked from the audience. A man he had considered small, a man he had underestimated, a man he had assumed knew nothing about combat. He had made an irreversible error. He had chosen the wrong man. It happened on the night of March 14, 1964, and this is the story that was never supposed to be told. Washington, D.C., Sheraton Park Hotel. Saturday night, March 14, 1964. The Grand Ballroom had been transformed into a martial arts arena, with folding chairs arranged in concentric circles around an elevated wooden platform. It was the National Karate Championship, not the largest tournament in the United States, but certainly among the most significant. Competitors from 9 states, 7 different styles converging in one space: Shotokan, Goju-Ryu, Kempo, Tang Sudo, Pseudo Taekwondo, Wado-Ryu. 300 people filled the hall: judges, referees, competitors, coaches, families. Everyone who mattered on the East Coast karate scene was there that night. The tournament had started at 9 a.m. 12 uninterrupted hours of matches. The crowd was exhausted, but also electrified, because the final event of the evening was about to begin, a special demonstration by the guest of honor, Victor Moore. Anyone with even a passing interest in karate in America in 1964 knew that name. Victor Moore was not just a champion. He was the most feared point fighter in the country. His record was not merely impressive, it was inhuman. 33 consecutive tournament victories, not just matches, but first-place finishes in complete tournaments. 11 years of competition without tasting defeat. His entire fighting strategy rested on a single weapon, a single technique so fast that no one in martial arts history had ever managed to defend against it. His sidekick was executed from a completely neutral stance. No preparation, no visible hip rotation, no feints, no warning. One instant he stood still, the next, his foot was already buried in your chest and you were staring at the ceiling. Referees had timed it at under 0.3 of a second from rest to full extension. Those who had faced it all said the same thing. They never saw it coming. They only felt the impact and then found themselves on the floor, trying to process what had just happened. Some described it as being struck by a car door violently swung open, a flat, sudden, massive force, as if appearing from nowhere. Victor Moore stood 1.90 m tall and weighed 100 kilograms, and that night he was about to choose the wrong man. Long arms, even longer legs. His reach advantage was so enormous that facing him felt like trying to box a man on the other side of a window. You couldn't get close enough to touch him, but he could touch you whenever he wanted. That evening, he had a simple purpose: to demonstrate his kick, to remind the audience why he was invincible. Maybe break some boards, maybe do light sparring with a prearranged partner, receive applause, shake some hands, go home. That was the plan. Victor stood on the elevated platform. His white GI was immaculate, perfectly pressed, his black belt wrapped around his waist 3 times. He held a microphone in his right hand. He had already been introduced, already received a standing ovation, already thanked the organizers, the judges, and the competitors. Now came the champion's ritual, the performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice filling the hall effortlessly, deep, controlled, the voice of a man who never needed to shout because his fist spoke louder than any words. Tonight I want to show you something that will change your understanding of speed and power. 300 people leaned forward in their chairs. My sidekick is considered the fastest technique in American martial arts. I don't say that, the record does. Pause. 33 tournaments, 33 first places, and not once, has any opponent managed to block it. Respectful, well-deserved applause. Then Victor made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. But I don't want to demonstrate it against a bag. Pause. Anyone can kick a bag. The hall fell silent. I want to show you what this kick looks like against a living body. Another pause. A real person in front of me, trying to stop it. Murmurs rippled through the room. Victor scanned the audience. I need a volunteer. Absolute silence. Someone who thinks they're fast. More silence. Style doesn't matter, rank doesn't matter. He pointed into the crowd. Come up and try to block my kick. Final pause. I'll pull it before full contact. No one gets hurt. That's what he believed. Silence. No one moved. Smart fighters knew that volunteering against Victor Moore's kick was a bad idea. The proud ones did the mental math, and the numbers weren't encouraging. 5 seconds. 10. The silence began to grow awkward. Victor smiled. He was enjoying this moment. The doubt, the tension, the fear floating in the air. Then his gaze stopped on someone in the third row. A small man, young, Asian. He wore neither a GI nor a belt nor patches. Dark trousers, dark shirt. He looked like a mere spectator, but there was something different about the way he observed. He wasn't watching like an audience member. He watched like a mechanic studying an engine, analyzing, measuring, mentally disassembling every part. Victor didn't think twice. You, the little one in the third row. He pointed directly at him. Want to see America's fastest kick up close? Some laughter rolled through the hall. The small man did not laugh. He held Victor's gaze, looked at the finger pointing at him, looked at the stage, looked at the audience, and answered with a single word, sure. He said it with the casualness of someone being asked to pass the salt. The man sitting beside him, a Filipino martial artist named Dan Inosanto, grabbed his arm. Bruce, no. Bruce Lee turned his head. He asked me. It would be rude not to respond. Dan closed his eyes. Not for Bruce, but for Victor. Bruce Lee rose and began walking toward the stage. In 1964, Bruce Lee was little more than a ghost in America. He was 23 years old, running a small school in Oakland, California, teaching Wing Chun. He had been invited as an observer, not a competitor. Ed Parker, seated in the front row, felt a knot in his stomach when he saw whom Victor had pointed at. Oh no. What's wrong? That's Bruce Lee. Who's Bruce Lee? Ed Parker didn't take his eyes off the stage. He simply said, Victor just made the biggest mistake of his life. Face to face, Victor Moore, 1.90 m, 100 kilograms of mass. Bruce Lee, 1.70 m, 61 kilograms. The disparity was obscene. Victor extended his hand. Bruce shook it. During that brief contact, Victor noticed two things. The hand was incredibly strong, and the forearms felt dense, compact, like steel. He didn't think much of it. Do you practice martial arts? Victor asked. Yes. What style? Chinese martial arts. Victor nodded with a slight grimace. At that time, Kung Fu was seen as decorative, pretty for movies, useless for real combat. Victor turned to the audience. We have a brave volunteer. Bruce Lee practices Chinese martial arts. Polite applause, nothing more. Victor leaned toward Bruce and spoke quietly. I'll hold back. Just try to react. Bruce nodded. Victor adopted his stance. Bruce remained relaxed, hands at his sides, no guard, no visible tension. Then the champion threw his kick. What happened lasted less than a second, but it changed everything. When the murmur returned to the hall, No one could agree on what had just occurred. Victor and Bruce stood about a meter apart. Victor was breathing hard, while Bruce remained motionless. No smile, no victory gesture, no celebration. Ed Parker stood up, took the microphone, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just witnessed is extraordinary." Pause. This is Bruce Lee, Wing Chun instructor and creator of a system called Jeet Kune Do. Bruce stepped forward. "It wasn't magic," he said calmly. "It wasn't superior talent." He looked at the audience. "It was physics." Pause. Most techniques have a telegraph. If you can read the telegraph, you know the technique before it happens. Another pause. In Jeet Kune Do, we eliminate the warning. He shook his head gently. "We don't react." He looked at Victor. "We intercept." Bruce demonstrated. Strikes without preparation, straight, dry, invisible. Then he turned to Victor. Attack again. Victor, pride wounded, threw the kick with full force. Bruce stepped inside the trajectory, redirected, and placed his open hand softly on Victor's chest. This is where it would end. Total silence. Bruce continued the demonstration. First, Wing Chun center line. How to protect and control the body's axis. How to occupy space before the opponent even realizes he's lost it. Then sticky hands. Kai Suro. Constant contact. Sensitivity. Instant reading of intention. His forearms moved as if they had a life of their own. Then something almost no one in the hall had ever seen before. The 1-inch punch. Bruce stepped up to Victor, placed his fist barely 2.5 centimeters from his chest. Without retreating, without winding up, without preparation, he struck. Victor flew backward. The chair behind him collapsed under his weight. The hall exploded. Shouts, applause, people on their feet. Bruce walked over to Victor and offered his hand, helping him up. Victor was smiling, not a mocking smile, but one of astonishment. How is that possible? Bruce replied calmly, "It's not the inch." Pause. "It's the body behind the inch." Bruce turned to the audience. "I'm not here to put down karate." He shook his head. Every art has strengths. Every art has limits. He looked around the hall. The question isn't which is better. Silence. The question is, are you willing to acknowledge what you don't know? Deafening applause. An hour later, in the hotel parking lot, Victor approached Bruce. There was no arrogance left in his posture. "I owe you an apology." Pause. "I thought I was the best." He held Bruce's gaze. "Tonight you showed me something real." He swallowed. "Can you teach me that?" Bruce shook his head gently. "You don't need a new teacher." Pause. "You need a new question." Victor frowned. "Not how do I win?" Pause. "But what don't I know?" Victor extended his hand. "Thank you for the lesson." Bruce shook it. "Thank you for the invitation." As they walked toward the car, Dan Inosanto broke the silence. "Now everyone will know who you are." Bruce looked ahead. "Good." Pause. "Next time, they won't have to ask." On March 14, 1964, a karate champion pointed at a small man in the third row. He didn't know he had chosen Bruce Lee. Now the whole world would know. If this story made you question everything you thought you knew about strength, talent, and limits, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now, because here we don't follow trends, we follow principles. Hit the bell, be part of this community, and never forget, the most important fight is not against others, it's against what you still don't know about yourself. See you in the next one.